guys, my name is Lana. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to give you 6 nonfiction recommendations from 6 different genres of nonfiction. So I started this off by looking up different classifications of genres of nonfiction because there are so many, and there are a lot of different options as to how to classify the genres. And the classification that worked for me was the two main subgenres of nonfiction: literary and informative. So literary is anything that is a story, so it's essays, it's memoirs, it's true crime, anything that where you're told a story. And informative is anything that is political, scientific, self-help, stuff like that. I'm going to start off with the literary subgenre, and I'm going to start with a humor comedy essay. And the book that I'm going to recommend is Do You Mind If I Cancel? So this is a collection of stories, essays, anecdotes by writer and producer of comedy TV, the original Will and Grace, Family Guy, and others that I don't remember right now. He is the husband of Brad Goreski, who is a celebrity stylist who had a show. I think they're doing a show together next year, and Brad also has a podcast, which is really fun if you're into celebrity stylings. So this book has stories from Gary's childhood when he didn't have friends and he was obsessed with TV and he loved soap operas. It's hilarious. And there were stories from his 20s when he was living in New York, and he wanted to be an actor at the time, so he was doing all kinds of different jobs to support himself, and it's outrageously funny. He's also incredibly opinionated, and he's annoyed by everything. He has a very strict understanding of the way things should be, and it sounds like something that would be annoying to read, but only in just the one story in his book did I feel like it was a little too far and too much, but other times it's just hilarious. And it didn't really bother me because I was reading it to be entertained. I don't think I would want to be friends with him, but he's definitely very entertaining. When I finished reading this book, I was telling all my friends about it, and I was giving them specific chapters that I like pay special attention to this one because I cried laughing in this one, and I would read my sister little snippets from the book. It was just so much fun. And there are also vulnerable moments, and like the last essay, the last story, it made me cry. So next subgenre in the literary nonfiction genre is what I personally called as serious. So it's kind of like a memoir again, but it's serious this time. And the book that I want to recommend is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a journalist, and this is sort of a letter that he wrote for his teenage son about the realities of being Black in a racist society. He shares stories of his upbringing, how the history of America was introduced to him in school, and how later he learned the truth and was slowly awakened to how his country saw him. It's full of stories of different experiences that shaped his understanding and opinion of, you know, the topic of race in the US. It's very raw and honest, and the writing is very poetic. I saw some reviews on Goodreads, and some people didn't love the fact that the writing was so poetic, but I thought it was absolutely beautiful. I found it educational and eye-opening, and there are scenes when he first becomes disillusioned of, you know, this concept of equality that was fed to him in school, and it's so well described that reading it, you feel that anger, that feeling of betrayal, and it was just so very powerful. The last subgenre in the literary nonfiction that I want to talk about is true crime. I love true crime so much. It was very hard picking just one book for each of these subgenres. I might do different videos in the future where I talk about it, just the one subgenre, and I give you all my recommendations in it because I have a bunch. But the book that I want to talk to you about today is Feather Thief. think I mentioned it in one of my other videos and I just need to talk about it again. So it all starts with a young man who's a talented musician, and one night after performing at the London's Royal Academy of Music, he breaks into the British Museum of Natural History and steals a suitcase full of rare bird specimen. Right? It's such an exciting book and it talks about so many things, but there are like three main topics that are being explored. The first one is the history of ornithology concerning rare birds, how they initially became, studied and hunted, and the whole fashion trend that used their feathers in the Edwardian era, and basically all topics that show you just how valuable those rare bird specimen were, not so much in terms of money, but in terms of how valuable they were for the museum, for science, for our understanding of the world. And the second topic is why they were stolen. What monetary value could they possibly have? And it shows a whole underground hush-hush black market with unlawful rare feathers trade. And so the author sort of is looking into how it's possible that no one is doing anything to stop it, and he looks at the lack of monitoring on big popular websites like eBay and even confronts them about it. The third topic is the character of this young man. Who is he? What's his story? And I love that the author is spending like a bunch of time trying to get inside his head and understand, why did you do it? And there's a whole like question of, is he a psychopath? And not to sound weird, I love the topic of psychopaths. I think it's fascinating. When I first started reading this book, the very first like prologue or something, I don't remember, talked about, one dark night, this guy broke into the museum, but then it moves on to like the 18th century or something, talking about this old dude who wanted to research birds, and I was like, no, I want to hear about the crime. But if you feel that way, just keep reading. It's going to get so good. And now we're going to move on to the second subgenre of nonfiction, the informative one. This one was so hard to just choose the one book because I have so many that I read in this particular subgenres of nonfiction. And I'm going to start with what I would consider the genre of inspirational nonfiction. The book that I want to mention in this one is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Elizabeth Gilbert in terms of fiction. Granted, I never read a fiction book that she wrote, but the premise and everything I know about Eat, Pray, Love is just not something I'm interested in. But this is a nonfiction that she wrote and I loved it so much. Actually, I still have it somewhere. Let me find it. Here it is. Create Living Beyond Fear. The thing that this book will do is it will make you want to create anything at all. You just feel like you need to do something after you read this. She looks at what is inspiration and how it was depicted and thought of in different cultures and different times, and what were the habits of some of the most famous creators out there. She also tackled the topic of fear in a way that I still use today. When I sit down to write, I've learned not to banish the fear outside of the door so it keeps banging and trying to get in, but sort of welcoming it into the room and finding a comfortable place close to me where it can like sit and sleep and not bother me, but like still acknowledge it and welcome it into the room, because fear will never not be a part of the creative process, and you need to learn how to work with it and not try to run away from it. She talks about her experience of writing Eat, Pray, Love, and how when it became such a big success, she couldn't write anymore because, everyone was waiting for the next big thing that she wrote, and she felt so much pressure. And she kind of talks you through how she, learned to get out of that slump that it's not even writer's block. It's not that she had nothing to write, it's just she was so scared of writing. And ever since finishing this one, I've read other books that also talked about those topics, and I've already felt like I was building on top of the foundation that this book created for me. I feel like this book would be beneficial for everyone. You don't have to be a writer or any kind of artist to really benefit from this book. So the second subgenre of the informative nonfiction is what I titled as political books, and I had a bunch of different options to choose from, mostly feminist books, but I chose to go with White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. A lot of people have talked about this book, especially after the events that happened in May and June in the US, and this book does exactly what the title suggests. That's exactly what the book is about. I do want to read you a little blurb because it sums it up perfectly. Referring to the defensive moves that white people make when challenged racially, white fragility is characterized by emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt, and by behaviors including argumentation and silence. These behaviors in turn function to reinstate white racial equilibrium and prevent any meaningful cross-racial dialogue. In this in-depth exploration, Anti-Racist Education, Robin DiAngelo examines how white fragility develops, how it protects racial inequality, and what can be done to engage more constructively. I mean, perfect. I love that this book looks at the defensive behavior and really, explores why it's there and, what is being threatened in us that we feel we need to defend against. And I love that it gives real life examples and situations and gives tips on how to handle certain conversations and situations, how to apologize, how to become an active listener and learn to respond instead of react. That it offers this concept that there is no such thing as a completely not racist white person, that it's impossible. We all have racism ingrained in our culture, so it's not about, becoming fully not racist and getting the not racist sticker and moving on with your life, but learning to become an active listener and continue to educate yourself, and knowing that you will slip up and knowing how to handle the situation when you do slip up, how to apologize, how to not make that particular slip up again. I adore that this book obviously is great to start your education into the topic of racism with, but it also gives incredible advice on how to just be more mindful, more compassionate in conflict situations, how to apologize without belittling the other person's feelings, recognizing harmful social situations when you feel like you can't speak up because you will be labeled as, that person, and all these other things that can be applied to so many other aspects of life. I listened to it on audiobook and it was incredible. And now my favorite subgenre of all the subgenres of nonfiction, pop psychology and self-help. So the book I want to mention for this genre is Willpower Instinct. This book is written by Kelly McGonigal, who is one of my favorite authors of nonfiction, and she is a health psychologist and a lecturer in the Stanford University. And this book talks about self-control, willpower, and how a lot of the things that are commonly believed about willpower are actually damaging to our productivity and they don't work. And when I was writing notes for this video, I actually stumbled on this little tidbit of information that I did not know about. Committed to sharing what the scientific community already knew about self-control, McGonigal created a course called The Science of Willpower for Stanford University's Continuing Studies program. The course was an instant hit and spawned the hugely successful Psychology Today blog with the same name. I love that this is how this book came to be, and a lot of times in the book she's referencing to her students in this class saying how they reacted to certain things or how they would try certain exercises that she would offer to better their willpower. So what the book tells us is that willpower is not like a virtue, it's a mind-body process, and it can be trained. So it looks at addiction, it looks at how our brains process temptation, and gives a lot of very interesting researches that were done on this topic, and explores everyday situations and gives exercises and practices to include in our everyday routine. It talks about so many things, and I actually started writing a list of all the things that I picked up from the book, and it became way too long, and I was elaborating on the first one and it was like a whole essay. So I'm not gonna give you the whole list, but I'm gonna mention one, just the one of the things that I learned from this book. Some of the things that she talked about to me felt like I was being freed, because I didn't even realize just how many of my beliefs around willpower had a sort of like aggressive, domineering property to them, and letting go of them, or at least like trying to me feels like I can actually just get to work. And one of those beliefs is that you should be strict with yourself, like a mean teacher or like a military leader, which means that, if, I'm trying not to do something, but then I do it, it means that I failed for that day and I have to be punished or told off. So what happens is that when you're mean to yourself, you're upsetting your inner child, and so that child wants comfort. And the thing you're like trying to abstain from or something, like that is usually the go-to comfort thing. When you fail and you're mean to yourself, like, why did you do this? You're so weak, blah, blah, blah. You get upset and you end up actually binging on that thing that you were trying not to do. And that is scientifically proven that if you're trying not to eat sugar, and you eat sugar and you start being super mean to yourself, you're just going to eat even more sugar after that because you need comfort. And it shows the incredible power of compassion, and that if anything will ever work to, help you achieve your goals, is compassion. Don't be mean to yourself, because it will sabotage the whole thing. And it's still something I'm struggling to learn to do, because it's a learned behavior. It's something that I've done my whole life, and I'm very strict and very mean to myself. And actually talking about this now is like a good reminder to really pay attention to how I talk to myself. And this is just like one tiny thing out of this whole book. There are so many others that I absolutely loved, and that like I feel this book is, I'm not gonna say that it changed my life, because it's not like I read it and suddenly I'm this super powerful, all-knowing person. It's introduces you to concepts and to things that you could practice, and how they say that what you practice grows stronger. These are the 6 books in the 6 subgenres of nonfiction that I wanted to recommend to you. Let me know if any of these you've read or you might be interested in, or maybe other video ideas that you have for me, because I need ideas. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.